The first thing neighbors saw was fire, an orange glow swallowing the Denver night sky. Sirens wailed as smoke poured from a two-story home where two Senegalese families slept inside. Mothers clutched their babies, fathers frantically searched for a way out, and alarms screamed over the sound of cracking wood. One man made it to a window, shoving it open and leaping into the dark. His daughter jumped next, falling into his arms. His wife followed, coughing, panicked, but alive. But for the rest of the family trapped inside, time was gone. 5 lives, including a toddler, were lost before firefighters could even reach them. The tragedy devastated Denver's Senegalese immigrant community. But even as the ashes cooled, one question burned. Who would do this, and why? The answer was even more disturbing than anyone imagined. It wasn't a seasoned criminal, it wasn't a gang fight, it wasn't even a hate crime. It was revenge. Revenge for something as small, as replaceable as a stolen iPhone. And the person behind it wasn't an adult. He was just 16. His name, Kevin Bowie. But how does a teenager's anger over a stolen phone spiral into one of the deadliest arsons in Denver's history? And what high-tech detective work would finally unravel this case months later? To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning, before the flames, before the panic, to the moment Kevin lost his phone, and something inside him snapped. Kevin Bowie was only 16. He told himself, they'd pay. Kevin opened Apple's Find My iPhone feature, the digital breadcrumb trail that lets you track a missing device. To his satisfaction, the app pinged back. The location pointed to a house in a nearby Denver neighborhood. Kevin thought he had found the thief's hideout. He thought the app had given him the exact address of the person who dared to cross him. What he didn't realize was that he was very, very wrong. And yet, Kevin didn't hesitate. He wasn't about to confront this supposed thief alone. He needed backup. And that's when he pulled 2 of his closest friends into the plot. Gavin Seymour, also 16, and Dylan Siegel, just 14 years old. Teenagers, barely old enough to drive, and yet about to plan something that would end with families in ashes. But what exactly did these kids plan to do? And how far were they willing to go over a phone? That's what we'll uncover in the next part of this story. One final spark, flames erupted. The fire caught fast, racing along the accelerant and swallowing the rooms in minutes. The three teens didn't stick around. They sprinted back into the night, disappearing into the darkness, convinced they had struck back at the thief who had humiliated Kevin. What they didn't know, the part that turned this from a reckless act of revenge into a devastating tragedy, was that the house they set ablaze wasn't the home of any phone thief. Inside were two Senegalese families, 8 people in total. And by the time the fire alarm screamed, it was already too late. But how exactly did the families inside fight to survive? And what desperate attempts were made as the flames closed in? That's where the story turns from shocking to heartbreaking. It was just after midnight when the flames erupted. Inside the Denver home, 2 Senegalese families were fast asleep. For them, it was supposed to be an ordinary summer night. For some, it would be their last. The fire spread with terrifying speed. Smoke filled the hallways, fire alarms blared, babies began to cry as parents scrambled awake, their rooms already choking with fumes. One father rushed to the bedroom door, hoping to lead his family out, but the moment he opened it, a wall of thick black smoke surged in. The exit was gone. He slammed it shut, coughing, eyes burning. There was only one option left, the window. He yanked it open, climbed through, and jumped. Somehow, he landed safely. Seconds later, he held out his arms as his young daughter jumped after him. Then his wife jumped too, coughing and trembling, but alive. As they caught their breath outside, they could hear the horror unfolding inside the rest of the house. Another father was still trapped, desperately trying to gather his wife and children. He shouted instructions, trying to find a path to safety, but the smoke was already overwhelming. The man outside ran to the front of the house, frantically punching in a keypad code, trying to unlock the front door. If he could get it open, maybe the others could escape, but the system failed him. The code wouldn't work. At that moment, a police officer on patrol spotted the fire. He sped toward the home, rushing up to the front door where the panicked father was trying to get inside. Without hesitation, the officer shouted, and with one powerful kick, he smashed the door open. But what greeted him inside was unbearable. Flames tore through the house, heat pushing him back. On the floor, he caught a glimpse of a body, unmoving. He couldn't go any further. The fire was too strong. By the time firefighters arrived, the blaze had consumed nearly everything. They battled it with hoses, but the structure was already collapsing. When the flames were finally extinguished, the truth of the devastation emerged. 5 people had not made it out. Among them were Jibril and Adja Diol, their 22-month-old daughter Khadija, and 2 other relatives, Hassan and Jibril Jr. An entire branch of a family tree had been erased in a single night, all because of a teenager's obsession with revenge over a stolen phone. For Denver's Senegalese community, the loss was crushing. These families had come to America chasing opportunity, building a future, and in one night, it had all been stolen from them. But while survivors and neighbors grieved, investigators were already asking the hardest question: who could have done something like this? At first, there were no answers, no enemies, no clear suspects. For months, it seemed like the case might stay unsolved. Until investigators tried something bold, something that had never been attempted in a Denver courtroom before, and it would change everything. In the days after the fire, Denver police were left with devastation and almost no leads. The families inside had no known enemies. There were no obvious motives. To the community, it seemed like a senseless act of violence with no explanation. But detectives refused to let the trail go cold. They combed through surveillance footage from nearby homes and businesses. That's when they found it. Grainy video of 3 hooded figures sneaking into the backyard of the burned house. The images weren't clear enough to identify them, but it confirmed one thing: this wasn't an accident. It was deliberate arson. Still, the big question remained: who were they? That's when investigators turned to a tool rarely seen in a case like this: a Google keyword search warrant. It was a bold, controversial move. The idea was simple. Whoever set this fire probably searched for the home's address beforehand, maybe to find directions, maybe to check the layout. So detectives asked Google to hand over data on anyone who had searched for that exact address in the days leading up to the fire. It was a digital dragnet, and while it raised privacy debates, in this case, it paid off. The results pointed back to a handful of IP addresses. From there, police traced the activity straight to 3 local teens: Kevin Bowie, Gavin Seymour, and Dylan Siegel. Once detectives had names, the rest fell into place. They dug into the boys' devices, their messages, their online activity, Evidence began to stack up, plans about the fire, purchases of masks, and the gasoline trail. In the end, the digital breadcrumbs told the story the teens thought they had erased. Their disguises couldn't protect them from the trail of data they left behind. By late 2020, police arrested all three. Mugshots of Kevin and Gavin were released, two teenagers staring blankly into the camera, their lives already changed forever. Dylan, being only 14, was processed differently, but still faced consequences that would follow him into adulthood. The community finally had answers, but it didn't make the tragedy any less painful. What started as revenge for a stolen iPhone had become the deadliest fire in Denver in more than a decade. And now, the justice system had to decide. What would happen to three teenagers who had destroyed so many lives? When the truth came out, Denver was stunned. Three teenagers, barely old enough to drive, were sentenced for one of the city's deadliest arsons. Kevin Bowie, the ringleader, received 60 years in prison. Gavin Seymour got 40. Dylan Siegel, just 14, was sent to juvenile detention and a young offender program. In court, grieving families listened as the details were read. No sentence could bring back the 5 lives lost in a single night. Outside, Denver's Senegalese community mourned. "We are heartbroken. We will never forget." The case broke new ground. A Google keyword search warrant helped identify the teens, raising questions about privacy and justice. But the story doesn't end in the courtroom. What lingers is the silence left behind in a home that once rang with laughter. In the end, the true cost of revenge was far greater than anyone could imagine.